If someone is dying, what is going on in their mind? Hi, I work pretty closely with palliative patients, and I can tell you with 100% confidence that she knew you were there. She held on until you arrived because she wanted you there. This is so common. I've seen patients linger on for weeks, against all odds, only to pass as soon as that one specific person shows up. I've seen it happen in the reverse as well. Families sat dutifully by the bedside 24/7 so their loved one won't be alone, only to have their loved one pass in the 5-minute span when nobody was sitting with them. Some people prefer their privacy. Your mom may not have been fully conscious, but dying patients often do have some level of awareness of what's going on around them. It sounds like your mother was in hospital when she passed, which likely means she was receiving medications on an hourly basis to keep her comfortable. No pain. And when you die, your hearing is one of the last senses to fade, which means that your voice was the last your mother heard. Your voice. The voice of someone who cares so deeply for her, giving her permission to let go. That's what she needed. And she's not alone in that. Over and over again I've seen the same situation play out in families from every walk of life. This is normal. This is how it's meant to be. I promise. Dying is a very predictable, but almost magical process. If you can take yourself out of the grief for a moment and view it as something sacred. Being there with someone in their final moments is a very special honor. You got to be there for the final breath of the person who was there with you when you took your first. That's really special. I lost my dad a couple years ago. He was hit while cycling and they had him on life support for a couple days, but there was nothing they could do. I did see my grandmother go a lot like you're describing. She definitely recognized me when I talked to her, but for those last few minutes I think she was in her own head and fading. You know, at some point a person is just absolutely in the moment of that experience and the rest of the world stops mattering. It's the life flashing before your eyes time, I think. I really don't know what it feels like, of course, but I do take comfort in the reality that it happens to all of us. Every single person, creature, thing that is and ever was has to do it. Dying can be better or worse, but the death part, and anything that possibly happens after that, it can't be that bad. Wherever my dad is, or even if my dad is a thing anymore, he's okay now. My grandma's okay now. Your mom's okay now. And we'll be okay afterwards, too. I've read about similar events before, where the people that are near death seem to hold on to life until they feel they can rest. Another things I'd like to add is that a EXGF worked at a retirement home. I'm not religious and such, but she told me that when the person dying didn't have any related family there, the personnel did sit with them, holding their hands. My ex told me that just before some of them passed, they often sat up in the bed and started talking to already passed relatives while looking into the wall basically. This was not a once-time occurrence. I'd like to think that there's an afterlife. I've heard similar stories many times from hospice nurses. It means you were important enough to her that she wanted to be in your presence one more time before leaving. Even though she was out of it, there was a part of her that knew, and she felt comforted by it. I hope you can view this as a final expression of love for you, rather than the stuff of nightmares. I'm very sorry for your loss. I have a suggestion for you. Before going to sleep at night, ask for a visit from your mother in your dreams. Think of happy memories as you drift off. She is always with you, as long as she is in your memory. That was really sweet what you said to her. Touching and comforting her. She was lucky to have a kid like you. Seriously. Out of my own experience, as I was almost dead but thankfully survived 2 years ago. Yes, we are in the moment and fading away, but also fully aware of who is around us and know what is happening and we hear everything what is being said to us. You were there in her last moments, and that is what matters the most, and you don't have to worry about the what-ifs because she knew but was in the moment of fading away, but she also had the strength to wait for the people who meant the most to her before letting go. I hope this gives you the answers you were looking for and help you with closure of the loss you had. She waited for you. You came. You gave her love and permission to go. And she went. My grandfather died of lymphoma. I drove a few hours to see him. The last of his grandchildren to do so. He died the next day. As to awareness, I think so, even if it's only the awareness of one animal nuzzling another. Asleep in a burrow. The question of consciousness is immaterial here. I believe. I'm sorry for your loss. Science says that people are in a lucid state and near-death releases chemicals to activate your hippocampus, which would trigger memories. People in comas who recover have some awareness of the external world. I personally believe that your soul, spirit, energy is connected to others, and your mother was waiting for you to arrive before transitioning. I'm sure she was aware of all the people around her. My grandpa was in a coma for the last week of his life, with hospice staying 24/7 in his house while he just lay in his bed. I went with my dad one night and held his hand and talked to him. And my dad also spoke to him. He was my maternal grandpa. We were all going that whole week to see him and say goodbye. But he didn't let go until the morning after my dad and I went to see him. He and my dad had kind of a rocky relationship, while he was very close to me. So I've always thought he did wait until my dad made his peace with him and until he heard his Tiger, his nickname for me, say goodbye. With my grandma, she was mostly not speaking and sleeping pretty much all the time in the last few weeks. But she wasn't in a coma. She just wasn't lucid. It was during the pandemic, so I called her, and my uncle, who was staying with her, answered the phone and said he'd try to get her on, but he wasn't sure. And I could just talk to her and she'd probably hear me. But when he brought the phone to her and said it was me, she woke herself up and spoke to me for some minutes. Then a little while later my brother and his wife stopped by and she also spoke to them. That night she slipped into a coma and a few days later she died. So as with my grandpa, I've always believed she waited until her grandchildren said goodbye. And that we loved her before she let go. One curious thing is that some minutes before she actually died, she spoke. According to my uncle, she wasn't really awake, but her eyes were open briefly and she called out my grandpa's name several times. My uncle told her to go to my grandpa if she could see him. And she passed not long after that. I do believe in an afterlife, but regardless of whatever you believe, or whatever the truth is, my grandma was seeing my grandpa just before she died. And she and my grandpa both held on to life, consciousness, until everything in their lives was settled. So I think that in the last minutes, it must feel peaceful in some way. Maybe there's no consciousness of pain anymore because your body knows it's about to go and your brain is muffling everything else. Your mom certainly seems like she waited for you to come. But I don't think it was hurting her. I think it was just like standing on the edge of something we can't comprehend and then stepping off. And I do think that your mom knew you were there. I was a hospice caregiver for a while. And from what I've seen and felt, she really was waiting for you. She knew you were there. And she left in peace knowing all her kids were with her. Hey, I've worked with a lot of palliative care patients. I'm so sorry for your loss. If your mother was in a care facility, she would have been given lots of pain medication and muscle relaxants. They won't give massive doses but small doses frequently to keep the patient comfortable. You may not have seen it, but often they have a little pump attached to them full of continuous medication. On top of that, the staff can give extra boluses. The chance of her being in pain whilst waiting for you is little to none. Now, I don't have scientific evidence to back me up, but I always believe patients who know they are dying. They mentally hold on to wait for their loved one to make it. It's a bit like when you're really sleepy, but you want to stay up just that bit longer to finish your movie or TV show. I've seen so many people waiting for their beloved child or grandchild or friend to be there and just to hear their voice. Your mother loved you very much and held on to hear your voice once more. One of my very best friends is a hospice nurse. She has amazing stories, and I do believe your mother waited for you and heard you. Hearing seems to be one of the last things to go. Similarly, people in a coma can often hear what is going on around them. The sedative medications cause amnesia, so they can only tell you a few things when they recover. I'm sorry for your loss. I highly recommend grief counseling if it becomes difficult to find peace. I lost my mom 2 weeks ago. We had changed her to comfort care only, so we knew what was coming. My brother and I were there. Then my sister-in-law. Then 3 of 4 grandchildren. She was unresponsive for the most part. Then my older son arrived and she seemed to rally. Eyes wide open, looking at each of us intently. I looked at her about midnight and said, "You know, Mama, you have everyone here now. You can just relax." And she did. I have no doubt she was waiting for my son. I miss her so much already. I cared for an infant that was dying. The mom had been cuddling with her all day. Hadn't eaten or showered. The baby was on full monitoring and death was clearly not imminent, so I encouraged the mom to take a short break and I'd cuddle her. As soon as she was put into my arms, her heart rate dropped. Her breathing slowed. Her oxygen dropped. I cuddled her and talked to her and rocked her, but it didn't make much difference. The mom was back shortly, and as soon as she was back in her arms, her heart rate breast hung and oxygen improved. She absolutely knew I was not her mother. The baby had a severe and unsurvivable brain injury and still knew I wasn't her mother. As for what was going through your mom's head, I cannot say. But I 100% believe she knew you were there. There is just too much anecdotal evidence and evidence on monitors to say otherwise. I'm sorry you lost your mom. Look, man, good on you for going there. It's hard. If it's a certain kind of dying you can choose when you go. She probably held on till you came. It was for her. You did the right thing. That's it. It's funny. My dad waited until I left to die. He was a very private person and would not have wanted me there. I tried to be there but finally gave up, and then he died. Apparently, from a neurochemical point of view, the brain releases forms of N-dimethyltryptamine, also known as DMT, when a person is suffering brain death. I've never done it myself, but it's one of the most potent psychedelic drugs around. Do with that info what you will. I think you did the only possible thing that you could have done for her, which is show up. She was absolutely relying on you to be there for her. And you were. You must have meant the absolute world to her, and you did a wonderful thing. Best wishes. Op. When I was about to die, my life flashed so fast before my eyes that I didn't remember that happened until after my near-death experience, but truly the last thought running through my mind was if the last thing I would see in that lifetime was the stainless steel surgery lights above my surgery table. I was right. I felt no pain. In fact, the only pain I felt was when I came back to my body. When I was seeing myself from above, I felt the utmost peace I'd ever experienced in my life. Your mom likely felt the same. I didn't want to come back, but when I saw my parents and how terrified and distraught they looked, I knew I had to for them. I nearly died a few years ago. It was a 50-50 chance after some emergency surgeries, and I spent time in a coma where it was really hour by hour. It was during COVID, so only my mom and husband were allowed to see me. Although I was in a coma, I knew they were both there. My children sent voice recordings and they were played for me. I don't remember those, but I know my mom and husband were there. I also heard lots of music. There was always music playing in my head. It was odd, especially since there was no music playing. I had a lot of hallucinations even in a coma. But I would definitely say you are aware of some things.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.